Tell us your thoughts on the coverage of the Putin thing.
There is an increased number of Westerners that have moved to Russia to escape the totalitarianism in their own countries in the West. And to hear this kind of, as you say, ad hominem attack, when I'm clearly in touch with people who are now living in Russia, who have an incredibly relaxed lifestyle there. It's just, it's just insane.
It is, and I would echo that, because we had somebody visited us a couple of weeks ago who is a British guy living in Russia, and he was very clear on what life in Russia is like for Westerners. It's quite incredible. But in the meantime, around the same time, President Xi Jinping decided to head to France.
Well, actually, he's on a trip to Europe for the first time in 5 years, which is very interesting timing. Yesterday, he was in Belgrade, 25 years after the NATO bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade during their, devastation of Serbia. And here we just have some of the images of the visit by Xi Jinping and his wife to Paris, and meeting with President Macron and our dear Ursula von der Leyen, who particularly made it very clear that this is about what they call balancing trade with China. In other words, I think curtailing what they perceive as Chinese trade expansion, overproduction of products, and basically an invasion, I'm quite sure they perceive it as that, of European trade areas. Now, I found it quite funny that how Reuters reported what was discussed. First of all, the Chinese tariffs could leave cognac makers, particularly French, with too much brandy. What is this based on? Basically, high Chinese tariffs on EU brandy would leave French companies with vast amounts of cognac that could be hard to sell elsewhere. I didn't actually know that China was such a large market for cognac, but there you go. Anyway, also quite amusing is that Macron's gift to Xi Jinping was a vintage brandy. And then secondly, the companies invest in electric vehicle battery factories in Europe. This again is to counter the influence of Asia, particularly China, in production of these batteries. So this goes back to Europe is seeking to attract electric vehicle battery makers. Now, we all know how reliable those are, to build factories in the region, home to car makers such as Volkswagen and Stellantis, as it tries to cut dependency on Asia and win in the green race against the United States. Now, while he was there, Xi Jinping penned an article for Figaro, one of the leading media outlets in France, and the article was translated by the State Council, the English section, so the full text of his article. And I just picked out a couple of sections that I found particularly interesting. I know, Mike, you've also got your opinion having read it. I do recommend that everyone reads it. It's a very interesting read, and certainly far weightier, far more intellectually interesting than much of what is produced by Western leaders and representatives. So one thing that I haven't included here is his comment about Israel-Palestine, and a slight softening, in my opinion, on the insistence on a two-state solution. He actually mentions the fact that this plan has now very much been eroded by events since the 7th of October. That's the first time that I've seen any kind of drift away from what I consider to be a complete political construct of a two-state solution towards a Palestinian state, but not necessarily adhering to the kind of two-state solution canard. But he also talked about Ukraine, the crisis on the people of Europe. He made that very clear. China did not start the Ukraine crisis, nor is it a party or a participant in it. Nonetheless, China has been playing a constructive role in striving for peaceful settlement. I've made many appeals, among others, observing the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity, of all countries and addressing the legitimate security concerns of all sides. I've stressed that nuclear weapons must not be used and a nuclear war must not be fought. China has delivered to Ukraine many shipments of humanitarian aid and sent its special representative many times to mediate among the countries concerned. The longer the Ukraine crisis drags on, the greater harm it will do to Europe, very important point, and the world. China hopes that peace and stability will return to Europe at an early date. We stand ready to work with France and the whole international community to find a reasonable way out of the crisis. Now, interesting that he mentions or points out France in particular, after France is the one that was basically threatening to send boots on the ground. And then finally, his final statement in the article, again, I find very interesting. He says, Confucius observed that a man of true moral integrity is one who is both friendly but independent and who does not compromise his principles and who is independent without any bias or taking sides. How unflinchingly firm is he in his strength? And he also quotes French writer Romain Rolland, said that it is so much easier to allow oneself to be guided than it is to think for oneself. This abdication is the kernel of the mischief. Now, for me, and I'd be really interested in your point of view, both of you, this to me is a message to France to secure independence from US influence. He says both China and France value independence as two major countries. Our interactions in the long course of history have released tremendous energy, swaying the trajectory of the world. Now we are standing at another historical starting point. Let us join hands together on this new journey towards greater progress in China-France relations to the benefit of our two countries and the world. Very interesting content in this article.
Yes, indeed. And he was also talking then to reporters during the trip, and he was talking about the issue of Ukraine and the possibility of some kind of international peace conference on Ukraine. But he said that China would only support that if Russia was involved in that as well. Now, it's interesting that there is supposedly some kind of strange peace conference planned to take place in Switzerland, I think in the middle of June or so. And Russia's not invited. So, this is pretty insane. How do you hold a peace conference on Ukraine unless both parties are at it?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely ridiculous. But I just find it very interesting, the wording of the article and what appears to be a deliberate targeting of France to uncouple it from US policy and to try and forge a way forward towards peace in Europe and in Ukraine. Very interesting.
Completely agree. And it did strike me as interesting that he chose France for the reasons that you said, because they are the country that seems to be leading the calls for boots on the ground. And we understand that some French military personnel have been killed in Ukraine over the last couple of years. So, we'll keep an eye on that and see whether France changes its direction or not. Okay, let's move on. If you like what the UK column does, you'd like to support us and take the extra graphic on there in the spirit it's intended. If you'd like to support us, head over to support.ukcolumn.org. Just remember that memberships are only a £5 a month, and we do need your support to continue doing what we're doing. We want to do more of it. And that means involving more people. So if you can possibly help us, that would be fantastic. Do share the material you find on the various platforms, especially from ukcolumn.org and UK Column Extracts.co.uk. And you can pick something up at the UK Column shop if you would like. Yesterday, the interview between J. Michael Waller and Brian went out on the live stream, and that is now available on the UK Column website if you didn't get to watch it yesterday. Now, J. Michael Waller is the author of Big Intel, and he was talking about Yuri Bezmenov, and people like this. They were asking just how can the destructive teachings of Saul Alinsky appear alongside US President Obama, British Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron, and the UK Labour Party. So a very interesting and wide-ranging discussion. Tomorrow at 1 p.m, there's an interview going out with Dr. Michael Niels. He's the author of Indoctrinated Brain, and he's speaking to Brian about Alzheimer's and the effect of COVID lockdowns on the hippocampus in particular. A quick reminder that on Saturday I will be speaking at this event in Steyning. This is Western Empire and the Great Reset. Sandy Adams will also be speaking at that event. It begins at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday at the Steyning Centre. Do join us for that if you possibly can. And Charles, very briefly, Julian Assange.
Yes, it's just a quick one. Today, the Odeon Cinema is showing The Trustful, the documentary film about the case of Julian Assange. And the important detail is that I believe Odeon Cinema will continue to run the film if attendance today is high enough. So if you're able to get down to an Odeon today to see this film, which is only today, the 8th of May, then please do, and please spread the word.
Brilliant. Thank you.